significantly increases the amount of residential development down near the path. The reason why commercial works better for Hoboken is it doesn't put a new population in competing for all of our scarce resources. It gives a more complementary type of population. It has people coming into Hoboken during commuting hours when our commuters are leaving. It provides potential jobs for people in Hoboken, so they don't have to actually leave and commute in and out of Hoboken every morning. It diversifies our tax base, brings a very important tax revenue stream that doesn't need the same municipal services that residents use, so it really makes sense for Hoboken, and that will be my focus.
Okay. You are in one of the most political cities in the planet, and one of the things that has changed over the last 4 years is the concept of what a reformer is. Mm-hmm. You mentioned in your opening that you've done things with the mayor, but it's clear that you have also opposed the mayor on political issues. And so what is a reformer, and how has that changed, and what is the relationship with the mayor?
So I would say the core definition of a reformer for Hoboken hasn't changed. The whole focus is on good government, transparency, involving the public. That's really what good government is and reform is in Hoboken. I don't think that's changed. I think some of the faces of reform have changed. I would like to think that I'm still a face of reform. You know, transparency, involving the public, being open and honest with our public. Good government is the core of who I am as a person, and I think that really extends to a lot of people in our community. It feels a little different now because, like you said, our environment is a lot more political. We're seeing more involvement from outside sources. As I've been very public about, we have a greater representation of unions around our construction sites and the money attached to those unions that, quite frankly, we didn't see under Mayor Zimmer at all. So it's a challenging time, but I still think at the core of our community, there's a lot of people that really believe in reform principles, and I don't think that's gone anywhere. Your question about Mayor Bala, this is what I've said to, this is what I say to people. I consider myself a very independent voice. I was an independent voice under Mayor Zimmer. I was Team Zimmer. I completely supported the majority of her agenda, but I pushed back sometimes. I didn't support her, her plan for Washington Street, but we ended up, I think, getting just a great outcome for Washington Street. With this mayor, what's interesting is we're getting a lot done. We agree on 90+% of the issues. The entire city council works well together. Notwithstanding some of the rhetoric that you hear, we actually vote, 85% of the time 9-0. We vote probably 90% of the time 8-1, and we've just accomplished so much. And under this mayor, we've gotten to accomplish things like a new Suez contract that is incredibly favorable for our community, saving taxpayers $30 million. We've been able to get a special improvement district done, which is historic for Hoboken. This mayor is open to good things happening and a variety of good things happening, and that's what we're seeing get done. But if I think that anything that he puts up is not good for Hoboken, my independent voice on those is going to be very strong.
Now, you have talked about, I guess, creating a commercial redevelopment for the North End, mm-hmm. Okay, and jobs. But one of the things, the big problems is that there isn't enough affordable housing.
Yeah.
So, how do you balance the job creation versus affordable housing in an environment which, let's face it, Hoboken is posh area for people who want to live in, and they're willing to pay top dollar to live there. How do you do those two things?
So I'll tell you what, from who I am as a person, I think that those that have more need to do more for those that have less, and I feel as though our system is rigged in favor of those that have more. And so I feel I've worked very hard in my life, and I feel it's my it's my responsibility as an elected official to make sure that we are looking out for everyone in our community, and we have to, because of the market forces, because of land values, because of the interest in development profits, we have to actually work really hard to make sure that we are building affordable units. I supported all of the, I've been on actually the Affordable Housing Subcommittee for 4 years. We made huge achievements in affordability, our affordable housing ordinances this year. I was absolutely supportive of every one of those. As we think about development, I don't think about commercial to the exclusion of residential. I think of commercial as being something that similarly we have to force and make room for, because developers generally prefer to build luxury residential. So, it's almost as if I need to make sure that all of our legislation and planning requires both commercial development as well as affordable housing, and then everything else is really what the property owners most want to build, which is luxury residential. So we have to find that balance, and we have to be able to speak the same language as developers. We need to understand what their math is, what the profit calculations on their developments are, so that we can have that conversation and know that we can demand less profitable affordable housing and less profitable commercial development. But if we don't have that skill set at the table, then we don't have the ability to, I think, be successful in those negotiations.
Now, you mentioned in your opening that you were partly responsible for the Monarch opposition. Okay. Now, you're also, because you live where you live, you're in also a conflict as a council person. How do you think you can still be a champion for the opposition of Monarch as a council person when you're conflicted? You really can't vote that way because you're part of the resident that's impacted by it. Sure. How do you resolve that conflict?
You know what? I'd say a couple things. First, I've always been in the fight for our waterfront. I was, as I mentioned in the beginning, I kind of was the public face of this for a long period of time, but I certainly wasn't by myself. There is a huge population of people in our community that are fighting for the Monarch. I've been one of those. I would say, as it relates to a vote, any settlement that ultimately occurs and any project that happens, sometime later next year, and I applaud the mayor for getting it to this point, is going to require consensus across the city council. So my individual vote, I feel, isn't going to matter that much, because this is a settlement that is going to involve a great development on the southern part of Hoboken, as well as the opportunity to convert what was supposed to be open space on the north end to open space, both that will benefit all of Hoboken. And I really just feel as though my advocacy will continue as just being part of, as a resident in the North End, and being part of, that fight, as well as all of the, bringing financial and real estate tools and discipline to City Hall. They didn't have that before. So I've been able to bring, like the requirement for real estate analytics and financial analytics and feasibility studies around all real estate projects. That is what will make a settlement like the Monarch settlement successful, is when our community or our government has the ability to negotiate with a developer using the same terms. So I do a lot, that touches real estate that will still ultimately benefit the advocacy for this settlement.
Now, one of the things that came up recently is one of the unions, maybe more of the unions, wanted to water down Hoboken's pay-to-play. Hoboken has a amazingly strict pay-to-play that's much stricter than the state. What's your position on that? Are you willing to bend to the unions, or is there a flexible place you can go where you are willing to open up the process a little more? Or do you want to stick to the kind of pay-to-play that is become the symbolic of reform in Hoboken?
Yeah, I will tell you that, my entire campaign is what they call grassroots. I'm very proud of the fact that almost all of my donors, I think I raised so far close to $20,000, and with the exception of a couple smaller donations, actually from 2 unions that I'm very proud to take, the rest of it are all from Hoboken residents and people that I'm close with. And to me, that's the right type of support that local elections should require and should have. I would like to see our pay-to-play levels stay at the same level that they are. If people want to move them a little, I mean, they're at $500. If they want to go to $1,000, I don't think that changes anything, but I'm comfortable right where they are. I think what we're seeing right now is, and what we've seen in the last couple of elections, is the kind of the introduction of money from outside of Hoboken in levels that can be, really impactful in our elections and very disruptive to our elections, right? And when one candidate can go and raise, a couple $100,000 from outside of Hoboken, and another candidate just can't, that just doesn't feel like it's a fair playing field on our local issues, and it feels as though it might create an undue influence on some of the really important issues, construction in particular. So I'm more comfortable keeping kind of our pay to play intact where it is, and that would directionally where I think I would want to go.
Now, let's talk about Second Ward, since you represent the Second Ward. What do you see are the upcoming critical issues for that part of the town? I mean, every part of the town has a singular issue that's exclusive to their part. What do you see as the overriding issues in the Second Ward that you're going to face over the next 4 years if you're reelected?
It's interesting. I would say the standout issue that I hear from people the most is what I'll refer to as sidewalk safety, and we're not doing a great job there. And that is not only our actual physical sidewalks, but at our intersections, the crosswalks. It's everything relating to pedestrian safety. We have a lot of families with kids in the Second Ward and that have to cross dangerous streets like 15th Street every day, 14th Street every day. And these streets have been identified, 15th Street in particular has been identified for over a decade as one of the top, most dangerous streets in the city of Hoboken. The, past 2 administrations have basically done nothing to improve this, and I think that we are going to need to do more. So this administration has introduced Vision Zero, a Vision Zero project, which I'm actually very thrilled about. It is kind of what I'll call a 360-degree approach to road safety, and it will include road design, it includes education, it includes bringing the community in to understand more of what they can do, but it's everything pedestrian safety, and I think it's incredibly needed, and that's what I hear the most about in the Second Ward.
Now, one of the things that makes Hoboken attractive is its access to Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And the problem is you have ferries that are now overcrowded, you have buses that are overcrowded, and you have a light rail that leaves you off at 9th Street, and if you live on 15th Street, you have a long walk. What kind of transportation elements can you, as a council person, work to alleviate some of those? In particular, the light rail, which we've been trying to get at 14th Street, I think?
Yeah.
What do you do for that? How do you address that?
So it's a really interesting question about the light rail. And this really comes down to the ability to think strategically across, citywide, and in particular about what the city needs and how we get there. If we, in what order do we proceed? Historically, the conversation within City Hall has been, we have to agree with the developer first on what they're going to develop, and at that point we can have a conversation with New Jersey Transit to decide how we get a light rail station. I met with New Jersey Transit a couple weeks ago, unrelated, but raised this issue about the light rail and said, why don't we just start planning that now? Like if we have all the plans in place, by the time we have a developer in place that's going to build, we can be shovel ready, we can identify a fully costed plan, and then just start. Because the plans for a transportational hub like that, or a new stop, they take a couple years to do, and I think it's something that we can start now, and just be ready for when we actually have a plan for the north end. As it relates to other transportation alternatives, this is going to be the biggest challenge for Hoboken. What we know, we should be connecting more with Port Authority and making sure that the additional capacity that they're adding on the PATH trains, that Hoboken is going to keep that capacity. We recently lost one train an hour to Jersey City because Jersey City is growing faster than Hoboken is. That's a problem. The buses, there's little to nothing that we can do to the buses. New Jersey Transit, the best that they can offer at this point is to give us the articulated buses, which are the bendy buses, to give us more capacity on each bus, and they're going to try that. That is challenging for Hoboken because they don't work on all of our streets, but we can't get additional, we're told we can't get additional capacity at Port Authority. We're told that we can't have a private bus company, either go to Port Authority or drop elsewhere. So we really need to think about ferry service. We really need to think about light rail service. We really need to think about and bringing commercial development in as opposed to residential, so we're not putting more people competing for our scarce transportation resources, and we're actually providing employment for people within our city, so we can still have that population growth and not have the same challenges on our transportation. So we need to think about all of that strategically, and Hoboken has never thought about it strategically before.
Now, one of the interesting things about Hoboken is its politics in general, and how things have wound up in strange places. The alliances that are forming for this election are completely different from what they were in past. Now, you have the Councilman Russo, who appears to be supported by Bala, or at least not opposed by Bala. How important are the new alliances that you are making, and who do you see as vital to getting things done that cross over traditional boundaries of what was old Hoboken versus new Hoboken?
I'm going to address that in a couple ways. And the most important message I want the community and anyone who's watching to know is that this council actually works very well together, and we talk all the time amongst ourselves. I talk to every single council member. If Councilman Doyle has something that's important to him, I'll talk to him about it. If Councilman DeFusco, Councilman Russo, Giattino, we constantly are talking to each other on all issues, which is why if you look at the voting record, we vote together so much, so often. So I think what Hoboken residents need to know is that politics aside, we're actually getting a lot done, and we're getting a lot done together. I'm someone who I firmly believe that I'll work with anyone who wants to work with me. And one of the things that I've realized over the last couple years is, historically there's very much been a, you're on my team or you're not on my team, or us versus them. And that's just not who I am as a person. I'll literally work with anyone who wants to work with me, and I'll work together with people on important issues as long as they're good for Hoboken. And what I feel like is the us versus them is the rhetoric that you hear just to create the divide for political and election purposes, but at the end of the day, we all need 5 votes on every issue, so everyone comes back together to make sure that we have the consensus and the right votes on issues that are important to residents. So I'm more comfortable not in the us versus them. I'm definitely more comfortable in a let's all get in a room together and figure out how to get this done. And I've demonstrated that. People see I can be opposed to the mayor publicly. I mean, he's clearly running a slate against all of the incumbents. But you know what? I sit in a room with him when we were doing Suez in particular. You know, we said, how are we going to solve this? And he said, I want your infrastructure to solve it, and he let me lead it. So we do work together behind the scenes. It's unfortunate that we sometimes give the impression otherwise.
Now, do we have any questions on Facebook we could throw at our candidate? Because I'm sure there are people. No? Okay, so you're stuck with me.
All right, that's okay.
All right, one of the critical issues that have been going on in Hoboken since I was there, and I lived there for about 4 years, water main breaks, infrastructure, and these things, and you made a deal with Suez, okay? How good a deal is that, and how do these various elements that you're working on go towards helping the infrastructure, the underground infrastructure in the city? Has it improved? Is it potentially going to get better, or are we still doing patchwork?
So Suez and infrastructure may not be like the sexiest and most interesting topic to the average person, but I can tell you this Suez deal is great for Hoboken, and it's probably the single thing that I'm most proud of. Hoboken has been plagued with water main breaks forever, and we had terrible contracts that were very favorable to Suez. And not that Suez did anything wrong. We just had contracts that allowed them to keep, 95% of our water revenues and put the entire burden of upgrading our system on Hoboken taxpayers. That's what we had historically. In 2017, what was presented to us by the prior administration was basically a continuation of that, where Suez was going to be able to keep, this significant amount of proceeds, of water revenues, and Hoboken residents were going to see a 15% increase in water rates just to fund infrastructure improvements. What we did with this new Suez contract is say, should Suez keep 95% of the water revenues? And the answer was no, they should only keep significantly less. So we were able to go from Suez keeping $5 million to only keeping $2 million, and that extra $3 million came to Hoboken, and $3 million, almost $3 million a year or $2.5 million a year for 15 years is a lot of money to be invested into upgrading our system. So it's a huge boom, no tax increase, no water rate increase, and all the money we need to be able to do the necessary upgrades to our system. Second, since I've been on the City Council, in the first year, what I said to Mayor Zimmer at the time, she said we don't have a water contract that would allow us to make these investments, and I said we have to separate our contract from making the investments. We just have to make them. And if we have to bond for them, we have to start the process. And so under my Finance and Infrastructure Subcommittee, we approved $10 million to start the process even before we had a Suez contract. Those improvements are finally being done this year. So to answer your question, we are literally on a pathway to seeing a total redo of our water system and an end to water main breaks.
Okay.
And yes, I'm very excited, and I probably just put a lot of people to sleep, but I'm excited.
Now, one of the problems for Hoboken is lack of open space, parks, and the big issue, the big fight right now is Union Drydock. Now, the council and the mayor seem to be on the same page for this one. What do you see as the progressive, what's going to happen over the next year as far as that? What is the council going to do? What do you think it has its ability to do, and do you think you'll be successful?
Oh my goodness. Excuse me. So, this is a tough one. Union Drydock is a really tough one, and it's tough because it's tough because historically New Jersey Transit has indicated that this property is strategically important to them. And so, notwithstanding we're battling New York Waterway to take it, previously when we went down this path, New Jersey Transit stepped up and said, if you take it, we're going to take it from you. And their jurisdiction trumps our jurisdiction. It feels a little different this time. Just from what I hear, it doesn't sound like they're stepping in. I think, we know that, or we believe that New York Waterway has an alternative site. We believe that they can stay where they are in Weehawken. They've made plans previously to stay in Weehawken. So I think in this particular case, we actually may be successful in taking it. If the state's not going to get involved, maybe we're just playing kind of a game of chicken with them. And guess what? they need to stay where they are. That is the best outcome for Hoboken. And I'm 100% supportive of the mayor's position on this. I've continued to fight in support of this. I will continue to fight in support of his position, and I just remain, kind of fingers crossed, hopeful that we'll be able to get it.
Now, Hoboken has done something interesting that I have not seen elsewhere, which is a special improvement district. In other words, I've seen maps where they've been very convoluted. Your entire town is a special improvement. What are the benefits? How do you help those people off the beaten path? Is it fair? In other words, somebody paying taxes on Washington Street or whatever you call it into the system, as opposed to Jackson Street or Jefferson or someplace. How do you, what's the system look like, and how do you make it fair for everybody?
So I think the reason, for people that don't understand or don't know what this is, we have a special improvement district, and we just approved this 2 months ago. The city has tried this a couple times and didn't get approval for it. When you look at Jersey City, all of the flourishing areas, economically flourishing areas of Jersey City has a special improvement district. So what it ultimately does is it assesses commercial property owners that put money into kind of a pot, and all of that money is spent to benefit our commercial properties. So this is a huge success for Hoboken, and the reason for that is we have not had historically, in the last decade or so, any focus on economic development in Hoboken. And if anything, we've done a number of projects that have had a really detrimental impact on our businesses. Washington Street is probably the biggest one, where our businesses weren't even considered, along the way. So I think that if we expect that the local government of a city of our size is going to focus and solve economic development, I think that's an unreasonable expectation. I think the opportunity really to put economic development into the hands of our commercial property and business owners is actually amazing for Hoboken. In terms of fairness, it's not finalized yet, but when I'm on the board of that. I've been working for the last 18 months with local business owners. Mayor Bala actually asked me to be the council person on it because he knows how passionate I've been about it. The idea is on this fairness is really to make sure that the assessments vary in a way where the burden that people will suffer actually is matched with the benefits. So Lower Washington will probably pay more money on a rate basis because that's where we're going to see the probably more visible impacts, whereas someone that maybe is a small business in the center of town, maybe they pay $100, $150 a year, but they'll get the benefit of branding and marketing for the city and being in a business directory, maybe being part of events, et cetera, and getting more visibility. And then over time, as we see different parts of Hoboken become the focus and evolve and develop, you'll see maybe the shift of those assessments over time. But at the end of the day, this is really a business and commercial property controlled effort that's going to be a partner with our city, and there's no plan B, and I'm just super excited about it. So we have one more vote probably at the next meeting that I'm hopeful will be passed again.
Okay. Well, we did get a question from Facebook, but it had nothing to do with you. It's wondering where Nora is, and frankly, we don't know. But, she's somewhere out there, and I hope she's listening, because it's very informative. But if she shows up, we'll ask her questions too.
Great.
But I don't think so. Parking.
Yes.
The number one problem for many of us.
Yeah.
One of the criticisms, and it comes from outside of Hoboken, but somebody who works in Hoboken mentioned it to me, and the fact is there's not a lot of street parking, and yet you have these parking structures that largely go unused.
Yeah.
How do you encourage people to start using those facilities, and what other means are at your disposal to improve parking or make people use other means of transportation?
That is probably the biggest loaded question, right, for Hoboken. And again, I kind of go back to we just have not taken ever a strategic approach to, like a holistic citywide approach to parking issues. We kind of take things on a one-off basis, but one impacts another. You know, we did citywide parking meters. We attempted to raise parking rates to make them a little bit more rational for you know, our location relative to New York City. We have our municipal parking garages that are only a couple in the city on our website, but we don't even refer to all of the private parking garages that are, you know, citywide. We don't have partnerships with our private parking garages to do what we can to maybe get discounts for Hoboken residents. You know, there's a lot that we should be talking about, but on more of a holistic basis. And we have to weigh the bringing more cars into Hoboken versus the need for parking, right? There are kind of two schools of thought. If you build parking garages, then people will come with more cars. The other school of thought is if you don't build parking, they're going to come anyway, and they're going to park on the street, and they're going to be competitive. And I actually don't know the answer to that, but I feel as though, like as part of this special improvement district, one of probably the most important aspects that we're going to look to partner with the city is trying to understand how we can have a partnership around parking, so we can attract people to come shopping and to come to our restaurants and be able to support our local businesses, but give them a place to park more affordably, or, you know, to park more affordably. So I think once we have this special improvement district, we're actually going to be able to have that more of a strategic approach. The benefit of having a citywide special improvement district will be having that advocate that can sit down and say, you know, we've done an inventory of all of the private garages, and how about we do something with the city where if you validate parking and we have kind of a comprehensive parking plan and bring all of those resources kind of together to bear. So it's a really complex project or a complex issue that touches so many aspects of Hoboken, and it really requires kind of looking at the whole thing holistically. And that's something, quite frankly, that's something that I advocated for to be part of our master plan re-exam process a year ago, and they chose not to do a deep dive into that. So we missed our opportunity there.
Now, one of the interesting things about Hoboken is that each of these elections, the word civility tends to pop up. Yeah. And this election's no different. There's a lot of an undercurrent of anger and distrust. And how do you build, you know, we talked about you work together with a lot of the council people and you talk a lot, but there's also this sense of building trust with the administration, because people don't trust this administration. I don't completely understand why. And some of the council people don't trust each other. How do you deal with that? How do you return to some sort of where we're not enemies and we're not mortal enemies? How do you tone down that civil discourse?
You know, I can't speak for everyone else. I can speak for myself. Like, my own campaign that I'm running is civil, is focused on the issues, is fighting for what's best for Hoboken all the time. I'm a loud voice and a loud advocate for all that is good and right for Hoboken, and I'm a loud voice that will fight anything that's not good for Hoboken. And I hope that through, you know, good government, transparency, I communicate more with people in Hoboken than probably any other elected official in Hoboken. And, you know, that's the part that I can play in it. You know, there's always a lot at stake in elections. I think there's a lot at stake for Hoboken in the second ward election. I feel like I've been a large and good contributor and a good advocate for the residents of Hoboken, and I think I bring a unique skill set versus some other skills that other, you know, council members bring, that if I'm not reelected, the city won't have the benefit of anymore. And I'm not a big self-promoter, but I think I do bring a certain a very specific benefit, as well as just being interested in, fighting for Hoboken. But there's stakes at a higher level, and unfortunately, because of those stakes, personal interests, career politicians, those kind of things, it's very difficult to undo that, because certain political strategies are us versus them. You're either on my team or you're not on my team. That's not my personal strategy, or not my political strategy or my personal strategy. And I think that can be incredibly divisive and incredibly damaging to our community. It's what happened during our mayoral campaign a couple years ago. And my biggest wish is that we get rid of that divisive rhetoric, and we have much more of a unifying rhetoric. I'm hopeful, but I'm not expecting it over the next couple years, unfortunately.
Well, just sort of a follow-up onto that, since Frank Rea Poopy is next week has got a hearing to get a new trial.
Yeah.
He's trying to go get a retrial. And the problem is he's become symbolic with the dishonest part of election. Pay to play's part of that process. How do you keep these elections honest? I mean,
Listen,
is there...
I will... we're in a different world now with social media and having to be accountable to the public, right? And you literally can only do so much. The average person, the average Joe Q public doesn't want to hear about that, right? The average Joe Q public wants to know that their elected officials are working on making their streets safer. They're working on, every issue that's important to them. But sometimes it's important to let them know that the one thing that's going to keep your elected official from being able to do that is something nefarious, right? And they need to be aware so that they can respond as necessary, if necessary. So I've been fighting voter fraud since my 2015 election, and two of the three candidates that I backed they won in the polls, and after vote by mails, they lost. And my head about spun off because I just couldn't believe it. And I did a bunch of research. I got involved in a voter recount. I chaired the Democratic committee for a brief period of time, specifically so that we could make some changes to poll workers where we knew that there was voter fraud. We made those changes. I worked closely with the chair of the Republican committee locally, and we made those changes. It's I think that what we're seeing with the Rea trial is that we've seen an end to that aspect of election fraud. I think, and I'm just hopeful that, everyone in the community is on the lookout for different ways that we have the nefarious and unfortunate influences in our elections. It's happening right now.
So in your monologue or your introduction, you talked about your accomplishments.
Yeah.
Okay, you got 4 years ahead of you if you get elected. Is there a roadmap of things you want to accomplish during those 4 years?
Yeah, I would say, to me, I would say my goal is to get people to stop at stop signs at every intersection in the city of Hoboken. I know, but you know what? But I'm incredibly hopeful with Vision Zero. I'm incredibly hopeful just with the, I would say Vision Zero as the framework that we can all work off of to make those changes community-wide. I'm excited about the aspect of Vision Zero that requires the engagement of the community, because this isn't about just making changes to streets. This is literally about getting every member of the public to step up and say, I'm going to do my part. I'm sharing in the responsibility of street safety. And so that's probably one big goal. I would say the second big goal is everything relating to making sure that we are getting the right development for Hoboken. And people watching this may say, oh my God, she's pro-development. It's not that I'm pro-development. I'm a realist. Property owners have constitutional rights to develop, so we need to work with our developers to make sure that if they're going to develop something, that they're going to develop something that works for Hoboken. We can't let development happen in a way where we miss the opportunity to address our community's needs, whether it's the need for a new school, whether it's the need for even flexible space to put kids in. If we're going to say we replace and upgrade our high school in the existing footprint, we still have to put 4 grades of kids somewhere for probably 2 years to be taught while we're making those changes. Well, where do we put them? We are 1 mile square. We never get to say, we'll take those 10 acres out by the highway and build a new school or a new hospital or a new whatever. So I actually feel like we're at a crisis right now, where we need to identify what the community needs are and make sure that citywide that we are going to be able to address all of the community needs. And I personally believe that the development community is going to be the major source of paying for that, because if our development community doesn't pay for it, then Hoboken taxpayers will. So we need to be really thinking, like, realistically, what is the vision for Hoboken and how do we achieve all that we need to achieve? This city council that's being elected in this election is going to be making incredibly important development decisions that have been delayed for a decade. So people need to be thinking about who they're going to vote in every single ward, and they need to pick the person that they feel is best suited to make sure that we're going to deliver the right development decisions for Hoboken, because they're going to impact us for a generation to come. Sorry.
Now, in your neighborhood again,
Yep.
not just the Monarch,
Yep.
which I believe is eventually going to become a park, but you have the Hoboken Cove, and I'm pretty sure the Half Moon is sunk there because everything else is sunk there.
Weehawken.
What do you do about it? What kind of things will that? There's an opportunity there of some sort. I mean, besides this, you can't lift the boats out of there, but you
Yeah.
can do something else with that.
Yep.
There's a waterfront there. It's
Yep.
something that's just sort of seems forgotten. What vision do you have for that?
So a couple things. First of all, in the second ward, we do have the Hoboken Cove that you originally said. That's the one that's right next to Union Drydock. Weehawken Cove is actually the one
I'm
no, it's
thinking of
okay. I just
Weehawken.
wanted to let everyone know we actually have both Hoboken and Weehawken Coves in the second
Okay,
ward.
I'm thinking
And-
of the one behind the
Yep,
Tate building.
Yep,
Okay,
and
great.
listen, they're both sacred and important for Hoboken for different reasons.
Right.
The Weehawken Cove has huge historic significance. Henry Hudson, his first point of landing, I might get this wrong, was in the Weehawken Cove, where he triangulated his location for the first time, which I think is incredible, and I actually only recently heard that. The Weehawken Cove is the boats that are in there. I'll address first. Basically, what we believe that happened is the Lincoln Harbor marina emptied out the boats that had been abandoned there. When they emptied out their entire marina, we suddenly had 7 or 8 boats just land in the Weehawken Cove, and that's where we believe the source came from. A number of them some of them have been pulled out, some of them have sunk, some of them are still floating and probably going to sink in the next storm. The challenge is there's jurisdictional issues there, but at the heart of it, it's actually very costly to remove those boats. When they're floating, they probably cost $10,000 a boat. When they've sunk, they probably cost $30,000 or more. They're stuck in the muck. And that's a taxpayer issue. That's not something that is easy in a rising cost environment for the city to take on a couple $100,000 just to remove some boats there. I've talked about just with some of them just clipping the masts underwater, putting a buoy on them, and doing what we can to just close off the mouth of the cove, with buoys and maybe some not a rope, but like a chain link. We've spoken with, there's a group of people within City Hall, including our fire chief and some people in parking and transportation, that have talked about doing that. But on a long-term basis, I think we have a huge opportunity there. We're doing the Rebuild by Design Park that is going to be just west of Harborside, 1500 Garden Street, where the Harborside Park is now, that is going to include the westernmost border of the cove, almost the entire westernmost border of the cove. So that is going to be an entryway into Hoboken, this beautiful park.
Is that where the slide is?
No, the slide will be on when you're coming into Hoboken, the slide
Right,
is on the
okay.
right-hand side. So on
Yes.
the left-hand side, it's the Rebuild by Design,
Right.
the Rebuild by Design Park, but it's going to be a beautiful park along that cove. And I think from that park, there was originally a plan to have a boathouse there, but having some sort of, boat access, kayaks and sailboats or stand-up paddleboards, et cetera, and really activate, the entire cove and make it usable by people. To do that, we clearly need to make it safe and do something with the boats. And then I would say The second thing that we've talked about more recently is trying to bring some sort of like ecological study or focus to the area, and maybe even make it like an educational area where people can learn about the local ecosystem, et cetera. We have some great resources in the city of Hoboken that have actually done this more along the Hoboken Cove, and it's a way that we may be able to actually kind of preserve the entire water in that area. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do with that area over the next couple of years.
Okay. Has anybody approached us on Facebook yet? One question.
Uh-oh.
We have a Facebook person.
Uh-oh.
This is good.
I hope so.
I follow everything on Facebook, but I'm old-fashioned. What's that? Okay.
Yep, I
Okay.
can see it.
Let's see. We would love to know. Okay. I definitely can't read this.
I can read it.
Where's the question?
Do you want me to read it? I'll read
Yeah,
it.
read
It
it.
says, so I can see it on my screen here too. So it says,
Oh, there it is.
yep, you got it?
Okay. Where do you stand on residential parking permit? Should it be raised from $15? If yes, to what price, for what, and for what reason?
So the answer is, I definitely am supportive of raising the $15 parking permit. It is, and even, when I talk to, I don't think I've spoken to one resident in the city of Hoboken that has said, don't raise it some level. The question is to what level? The question is to what level, and the question is to how does it apply to different people within our community, and how does it apply to the number of cars, in a household. And I think we need to price it, definitely increase it. I don't know the exact number. We've talked about as low as 50. Some people have said 350. I think that's probably too high, but somewhere in the middle. I would say for a second car, it should be significantly higher. We should be doing what we can to incentivize people not to have a second car, or to encourage people, if they're going to have a second car, to just park it in a garage. If they can afford a second car, put it in a garage. Someone recently came up, it was on Twitter, maybe it was one of our Bike Hoboken people, mentioned the idea of pricing it based on the size of the car, which I thought was very interesting. So if you have a smaller car, your parking permit could be lower. If you have a giant, whatever one of the giant huge SUVs are, maybe
You mean a Humvee?
a Humvee.
Yeah,
Actually,
right.
Humvees I don't even think are the longest,
okay.
but maybe some of the big, really long cars that effectively are taking up more spaces that you
Okay.
charge more. So I'm definitely ready to sit at the table and make that change, and I think we should be making that change sooner than later.
Now, Hoboken is one of the few places that has done a survey of available parking. And do you know what that figure is by any chance, of how many parking
goodness.
spots are actually available in the?
How many parking spots in the entire city, or
Yeah.
just on the street?
Yeah, street parking.
Well, we have something like 9 or 10,000 spaces and 15,000 parking permits. So I don't think there's available
Right.
parking spaces on the street at all. We have way more permits than we do spaces. One of the
How's
discussions.
that work?
I know, right? You know what? Because there's a lot of people that have a car that has a parking permit, but they also have a spot in a garage, right? So they do
okay.
have a place to put their car. And one of the recent conversations I've had with our parking director, Ryan Sharp, is doing something to actually reduce the number of parking permits. Another topic we've talked about is trying to figure out a way, if it's possible, I'm not sure how it's possible, if someone has a deeded spot in a garage, to not allow them to have a parking.
Yeah, Jersey City does that.
Yeah,
In Ward E, they have required, if you have available parking in your building, you're required to take it, and you're not allowed to get a permit.
That's interesting. I still think we need to understand that better, and the nuances of how they do that. I'm definitely open to whatever we can do to make that balance. And I know when people are watching, there's going to be some people saying, well, wait a minute, I'm on a fixed income, I can't afford a higher parking permit. I think that we have to give considerations to people that may be lower income, that we don't want to make it more costly for them to be in Hoboken already. And I think, but I think all of us are going to have to make some personal sacrifice around that in order to have a better outcome for everyone in our community.
Now, one of the questions we just got is your position on e-bikes, and I presume that means scooters also, and a variety of other modes of transportation that are not conventional cars. And I want to know if they have snow tires. No,
Yeah.
sorry. But what is your position on those elements that in the community?
I am definitely supportive of any alternative form of transportation, if as long as they're safe, is what I would say. So something like an e-bike, we see a ton of people using e-bikes. As long as they're riding them safely, they're respectful to others on the road, they're respectful to pedestrians, then I'm 100% supportive for the environmental reasons. It gets cars off the road, and it allows for more efficient transportation, and it supports commuters. As far as scooters, I've been the most I think I'm the only council person that has been vocal basically on scooters. I originally did vote in favor for the pilot. We were made a lot of promises by the administration from an education standpoint and a safety plan standpoint, none of which were delivered. So since then, every single safety improvement we've seen around the scooter program, I've led every single one of those efforts. I think we have more to do as it relates to scooters. I'm concerned going into the winter. If we're asked to continue that pilot in the winter, I'm probably going to say no for the reason that you kind of joked about, which is I don't know if we've really thought through what a small tire looks like on a slushy street in Hoboken, or we have a snowstorm and they can park anywhere on the sidewalk. Like, what does that look like? I've worked closely with Director Sharp on doing what we can to try and make these programs better and safe for Hoboken. I don't think we're there yet. I'm still willing to try hard to see if we can actually make them safe. I'm meeting with Lime again next week. I've met with Lime a dozen times. I'm meeting with them again to understand what their thoughts are. But if we can find a way to have them be safe in Hoboken, then I will be supportive, and I'm committed to working and rolling up my sleeves and doing what we can to make them safe.
Now, I'm not sure about this last thing. Was there a tax increase this year?
There was.
Okay, so how do you keep taxes stable, and how do you avoid those nasty little things called tax increases?
Listen, this very specific issue kind of plays to my strengths. I've chaired the Finance and Infrastructure Subcommittee for 4 years. 3 of those years, we had no municipal tax increase. The 4th year, we had a small tax increase, but I will tell you that we fought tooth and nail. We started off with a 3% increase that was proposed by the mayor. We took with a fine-tooth comb, we went through that budget and we made line item cuts wherever we saw wasteful spending, and we had to fight the mayor to make those cuts. We even went down to the DCA to be able to get the DCA to be confident and comfortable with the cuts that we were recommending. And they were. They ultimately came back and they were 100% supportive, but it was a real battle because my own personal view is the mayor's budget had wasteful spending in it and excess spending that was unnecessary. On a go-forward basis, I will tell you it's going to be tough. We had a council meeting last night. We talked about rising healthcare costs, which everyone is plagued with, whether it's a corporation, a municipality, an individual, right? Healthcare is really just kind of drives costs, and that's going to be a challenge for us. The only way that we're going to be able to keep taxes low is to keep focusing on getting rid of wasteful spending and find sources of revenue and find ways for other people to pay for things. So, for example, the Suez contract. If we did not enter into that Suez contract, you would have seen the city of Hoboken residents having to pay $30 million more to upgrade our water system, and now they don't have to pay that. So we should be looking all over the place for the best economic deals, and the city historically has been terrible at that, and that's been one of my strengths and my focus. Back to the Lime scooters. The original Lime scooter was, the city was getting $50 a scooter, $12,000. Lime was probably making between $1.5 and $2 million. And you know what? I pushed and said, we need a better deal, and we have a new contract that's set for the remainder of the pilot that's going to put $100,000 in our pocket.
Okay, we should wrap this up.
Oh my goodness,
you have
it's
a
been an hour?
closing statement, as if there's anything you haven't covered. Let's go ahead.
You know what? It's funny. I prepared an opening statement. I didn't prepare a closing one. But what I would say is, as I've said throughout this, this is a really important election for Hoboken. You know, there's politics at play in terms of, you know, the different candidates. But at the end of the day, people need to vote and elect the person that they feel is going to be the best representative for the second ward, and that is always going to put Hoboken first. I am an independent candidate. I will support all the best ideas. I don't care who they come from, and I will constantly ensure and make all the time that Hoboken's interests are protected and that they come first. And I hope you vote for me 1C on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this concludes what turned out to be not a second ward debate, but I'm glad we got to interview you. I'm sorry Nora wasn't here, but this was your second ward debate, and it was produced by Hudson Media Group, which is doing a whole series of these when sometimes even people show up. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you.
a really good night. I'm Al Sullivan. Hope to see you next time.